Encouraging start. That's what US President Joe Biden said after leaders of several countries made commitments to tackle climate change by curbing their greenhouse gas emissions. 40 world leaders were attending that virtual leaders summit on climate. President Cyril Ramaphosa was among them. He told delegates that developed nations have a responsibility to support poorer countries on the issue of climate change. Tandile Chinyavanu is a climate and energy campaigner at Greenpeace Africa, joining us on the lead this afternoon to talk more about those outcomes of that gathering. Tandile, grateful for your time. So President Ramaphosa made the point that the richer nations need to do more because a lot of them actually emit more greenhouse gases. Do you think it'll finally happen this time, because it's not a new call?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. It's difficult to say, but most certainly what we can do is hope that it will definitely happen, and that South Africa will put more ambitious targets forward. In that same breath that President Cyril Ramaphosa mentions that these international or developed countries have a responsibility to assist financially our developed countries such as South Africa, it's also important that South Africa has a responsibility to meet sufficient and decent commitments with regards to reducing emissions.
And on South Africa specifically, President Ramaphosa, in his address to the summit, said that the country's emissions will begin to decline from 2025, shifting emissions decline 10 years earlier from an earlier target of 2035. How significant is that in the global context?
It's actually very disappointing what South Africa has put forward in terms of our emissions reductions. In an international context, if every country were to put forward the same commitments that South Africa has put forward, we would still be on track to a 2.6 degrees Celsius world, and that ranks our commitments as insufficient. So it's important that South Africa really go back to the drawing board, reconsider these commitments, and bring something more ambitious forward.
And how much can a country of South Africa's size actually do in as far as upping its own targets, its own ambitions as far as climate change, but also influencing the likes of the United States? You've got the Russians as well. You've got China, which is the worst offender when it comes to carbon emissions, and they've so far in the past been very reluctant to commit to much more.
Well, it's important for South Africa to, as a developing country, to really set the tone, not only for the African continent as a leader in terms of climate action, but as well as on an international scale, that if South Africa can make these commitments, then more other countries are capable of making similar or stronger commitments than we are able to. And so South Africa's commitments right now, which has committed to a reduction of maximum of 440 metric tons of carbon dioxide for by 2030 is highly insufficient. And to really achieve the reductions that we need, they need to halve that by 2030.
Let me ask you then about the host nation, which is the United States. They've said that they're going to cut emissions by 50 to 52%. That is from the 2005 levels for the United States. China, the world's largest carbon emitter, has said that it will gradually reduce its coal use from 2025 to 2030. Now, what they are saying is that they're hoping to achieve net zero emissions by 2060. Are those two commitments good enough?
Not at all. I'll try to answer what I heard because I think I lost audio in the middle of that question. But from my understanding, the commitments set out by the U.S. specifically are not at all sufficient with what is required by science. And for them to truly really put forward a commitment that could actually be contributing towards closing the emissions gap, they'd need to make a reduction of about 70%. So I think most of the world was quite relieved to learn that the U.S. had rejoined the Paris Accord, but this commitment that they've put forward is rather anticlimactic and really a disappointment for all of us to see. They are capable of doing a lot more than what they've put forward.
Tandile, such a pleasure to speak to you today. Thank you so much for your time.